think for me it's always about physical participation. So when I begin to conceive a new show, I always start with imagining a crowd of people just standing, and then events happen, people reveal themselves, and the crowd reforms itself in certain kinds of ways. But from then on, in order to see, in order to commit to the development of the dramaturgy, requires a certain kind of participation. I think the best example for that, for me, of that is something like the Haxey Hood, one of these large-scale rural games events, which happens every January the 6th in the village of Haxey in North Lincolnshire, where a large group of men forms around the hood and over a period of several hours, tries to push the hood into one of the public houses in the Isle of Axholme. For me, what's interesting is that participation can be interrupted, so you can decide to participate and then withdraw, decide again, but participation is only possible for two reasons. First of all, that the rules are explicit, so you're casting yourself into this melee with a group of men, and second, there are kind of provisional ad hoc relationships coming into being through the activity itself, but what's going on here is very clear. Well, I think during an activity like that, one builds certain kinds of relationship which are only possible within this kind of special condition, this special set of conditions. I think what I usually refer to in theatrical terms as a special world, where, however different this is from everyday life, however unusual the conventions might be, the explicit or implicit rules bring about new kinds of relationships. So in that instance, men grasp men in a way that would perhaps seem unusual in everyday life. Certain kinds of social mores are being confronted in that situation. So I guess then relationality in that world is about making decisions in the moment about how to go on. I remember a performance made by ACO, the Israeli Arab company from Acre, on the Holocaust, where they do the scenography is extraordinary. They build a whole wooden house, and the small group of audience participants, there are only 20 of us, I think, actually inhabit the house, but you have to crawl through trapdoors, up through floors, and so on, in order to see various scenes in the house. And I remember in one moment, we're sitting in a very small room with a low ceiling, and suddenly the ceiling comes down, and in front of you is a banquet, a wonderful Jewish banquet, with two of the performers, one man, one woman, at either end as our hosts. And it's just a wonderful scene, and the food is there for us. And in one moment the lead actor said, "Come on, Mike, you're a vegetarian, we've laid on some specially for you." And so you become complicit in the situation, and it's very nice. And then you realise that the host is gradually beginning to speak in completely racist terms about Arab-Israeli relationships, and you do nothing. So you're kind of complicit, you're participating in a very social kind of way, and yet, are you part of that argument? Are you not part of that argument? What's your relationship to that argument? It's very, very clever, very, very, very clever technique indeed. In the mid-1990s, the very last kind of big-scale Breathgrove show that I was involved in. And in one way, the show that closed the door on Breathcove was a work that we did called Prydain, and we had the idea every night of asking 50 people to be nominated participants within a larger group of people. So there may have been 250 people present, but 50 would have nominated themselves. They were identified by particular jackets that they were wearing, and the idea of the show was actually to try and create sequences in the performance almost instantaneously at the point that they were required in the performance. So actually, whilst some sequence was being enacted, another group of people would be being rehearsed into the next sequence that would then take over. So you had this kind of rolling, the idea of rolling performance, which is being brought about in the moment and only through the involvement of those people who have nominated themselves as participants, and they don't know the scenario at all. So they're simply going with you, I think. I think the challenges are really to make the parameters of the special world explicit, even if they're only coming about in the moment of their enactment. So that moment of engagement is very clear for all involved. I'm not very keen in kind of pulling the wool over audience's eye, getting people to participate despite themselves in a way. So I think that's always the challenge, to communicate perhaps what may or may not be feasible here. Not to say that that's a kind of limitation on all that might happen here, but I do think you need some kind of some kind of rules that demonstrate that this is a special world, this is a special set of conditions,